Well, good afternoon, good evening. This is Backlash, and you are in for another treat with the Conspiracy Keepers today. Scooter McGee and Joe Monaco. How are you, gentlemen?
Very good, very good. The shape of the world, I'm not sure is good, but we're doing okay.
Good. Scooter, have a good Thanksgiving?
Absolutely, doing well, Backlash. Good to see you, Joe.
Well, since the last time we spoke, when the last time was, we were talking about predictive programming. I think we touched on that a little bit. Do you want to just do a recap on what you consider predictive programming is?
Yeah, well, what they do is the global elite, anytime they're going to do something, anytime they're going to perform some kind of catastrophe like 9/11 or anything like that, they always tell us what they're going to do beforehand. So they always tell us in movies, literature, situation comedies, cartoons like The Simpsons. I mean, they've been notorious for doing that. The Simpsons is probably the biggest one that people know about. But what the Simpsons do is they're not really predicting the future. The creator of The Simpsons is a 33rd degree Mason. He's a Freemason, just like all of them are. So he's in the club. He's in the know. So he just knows what they're going to do, and he incorporates it into the cartoon. But that kind of like begs the question, it's like, who are the Simpsons? I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before. If you break it down to what that means, the Simpsons are the sons of Sims. So who are the Sims? The Semites is what they're really talking about. The Jewish people from back in Jesus' day that would hide things in their writings, kind of a double entendre. They would say one thing, but they really mean something else. So the Simpsons are the sons of Semites. So they're doing the same thing today that they were doing back then. So that's who the Simpsons are, and that's why they have the predictive programming in there. Now, the Simpsons predicted the Trump presidency all over the place. We saw the Trump presidency being predicted in things like Back to the Future. Biff, he had kind of like the orange hair in some of the later ones, the Back to the Future too. He owned a casino. I mean, there was the same thing. So they do this stuff all the time. And they did it with the virus. We saw in the movie The Terminal, The Dead Zone. If you want to look up The Dead Zone on YouTube, it's about a 2-minute clip of the trailer. That's all they talked about was the coronavirus. They even called it that way back in 2003. So we know they do this. There is just no question about it. I mean, we have proof of it all over the place.
Scooter?
Go ahead, guys.
Joe missed one, which is the infamous Donald Trump and the Arabs with their hands on the orb.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
I mean, that's one of the big. I'm sorry, Joe was nailing everything else. There's the infamous, okay, so The Simpsons is one thing because that's a cartoon. I, like most Americans now, are running out of money. But last week we showed a dollar bill. And what we were talking about off camera was, the conspiracy of 9/11 right there on the backs of our U.S. currency. And that currency has been changed. So now when you fold the backs of the 20, the 50, and the $100 bill of U.S. denominational currency, it doesn't show the collapse of the towers anymore. It shows something strikingly different. And it's subject to interpretation, of course, but it very much appears as if a giant dam is in the process of bursting.
Yeah, Hoover Dam. They've done that in other places. I think that's a possibility. The Golden Gate Bridge, we've seen that in movies, and we've seen Seattle under attack as well, all over the place. I mean, if you want to look at Seattle in movies where they've destroyed the pinwheel, and all that kind of stuff, that's all over the place too. So those do seem like places for future attacks. One thing that go ahead.
And in all fairness, we cannot discount HARP.
That's right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I reference Banda Aceh, the great deep sea quake that decimated and changed the landscape of how we report tsunamis, yada yada. I mean, everything.
Right.
And Banda Aceh is still very suspicious.
Mhm.
And then can HARP resonate and do that? Depends upon the data you lok at, because that's what it could do. Well, you'd need so much energy to be, yeah, well, the jury is still out, but there is overwhelming data that can no longer be discounted.
Yeah, right.
The great deep sea quake known as Banda Aceh is not the bill of goods we were sold. And if it wasn't HARP, was it the test of some new type of weapon, deep sea, and that was a consequence or a side effect, or was it intentional? We don't know. We're never going to know, because the government is so busy lying to us 24/7 out both directions of their mouth.
Yeah, and they've got all kinds of technology that we don't know that they have. I mean, you know that they do. From what I've heard, they're at least 40 years in the future, no matter what. In other words, the technology we have now, they had 40 years ago. So who knows what they have at this current time that they have, that we don't know about either. So they're way ahead of the game.
And then so back to the predictive text of what's coming up. What should we be worried about? Joe, I was telling you in Backlash, these Fox coming up in January shows where California is falling off the side of the, San Andreas is going to go again. The volcanoes are erupting. Here comes the tsunami. And the other 9/11 show out of Texas with Rob Lowe. The sky will be falling there. So is that suggesting, and again, HARP could actually resonate the lava flow underneath the Yellowstone caldera and affect it to force it to erupt. We have that technology.
Yeah.
And anyone in the government who says they don't is a pathological liar.
Well, I've got a question on two things. First off, for those of you that are watching this,
I'm yelling.
What is HARP, Scooter?
Go ahead.
It's an acronym created for DARPA. The High Atmospheric or High Altitude Atmospheric Resonance Program.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is
in
it?
Alaska. It's in Alaska. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just one array. There's arrays around the world. And Arecibo just collapsed. Arecibo is part of the HARP array. Arecibo just collapsed in the last 36 hours. Mount Arecibo. No, that's where Jodie Foster sat down in Mexico in the village on that big radio telescope.
For contact?
Arecibo is part of the HARP array. I'm yelling. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, and HARP is attached to all the 5G. They're attached to all these cell phone towers. Yeah, they're all interconnected. So yeah, absolutely.
So Backlash, what is HARP actually? I've been on a radio a couple of years. I used to know this off the top of my head. It's an acronym. It has to do with sending charged ions, beams, into the upper atmosphere to do things to it.
Yeah, it's I did look it up. High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
Aurora, yeah, the auroras. Again, can HARP create aurora borealises where they shouldn't be? Because that's all charged particles and how it's reacting to the atmosphere. These arrays send hundreds of millions of watts up into the atmosphere conducting tests. Physicists and geologists, if you show them this data, they can tell you what side effects and consequences could be. You could have geological disruption, period. Means you could take a fault line that is otherwise sedentary, it's quiet, it's dormant,
stable,
and you could resonate it with particle beam weapons, fracture it, rupture it, and create to the eye and to the seismometers, hey, an earthquake just happened. Yeah, it happened from a satellite shooting a particle beam weapon. Particle beam weapons exist. This is not Buck Rogers. These weapons exist. Some have recently been declassified. Direct energy weapons, otherwise known another acronym, DEWs. These things exist. We've used them not only now in the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, we're using them now at home against mostly peaceful protesters. We've
Yeah,
seen
they actually,
weapons be deployed in Denver, Minneapolis, Portland, and Seattle.
and they started the fires that we were dealing with this summer. If you notice the fires in the West Coast, they stopped at the border in Canada and they stopped at the border of Mexico. So apparently these fires don't cross borders.
Allegedly, there's a lot of suspicion to many of these wildfires that burn out the homes and leave the trees.
That's right. That's exactly right.
There's a lot of speculation. We don't know. We can't prove this, but there's no evidence. There's mounds and mounds and mounds of it, but no one will give us a straight answer.
Well, they never will. All we can do is look at the evidence that we have. I mean, you can see the rays that are coming down. They're kind of, it looks like a beam of light, and you can see these fires that start around it because many people have caught them on video. They've caught them on photographs, and then they've caught them all over the place. And they post them, and of course, you know, the government denies it. Oh, no, that's fake news, whatever. But no, they actually are.
Backlash, how are we doing on time? Do we want to do a predictive part 2, or do we want to just, can I just go throw my head into a sewer?
Well, you're getting the squirrels and the chipmunks running in my, or actually the hamsters in my cage right now. I think what I'd love to be able to do, especially since we're revamping and redoing all of this, and people are just joining in, you said something earlier about the global elite, and you know, all politicians are liars. So I myself am wondering how many actual politicians know everything that's going on versus what you're considering the global elite that are doing it behind everybody's backs, that are getting military funding.
Then I yield to the chair, Joe Lanier. Joe Lanier, President Obama just recently in an interview very smugly was asked by a reporter, quasi-reporter in Hollywood, about UFOs. And he very smugly didn't answer, again, a non-denial denial, but it's the facial expressions. But what's your take on that?
You know, yeah, that's a very good question. How much do they know, and who knows the most? I believe it's always on a need-to-know basis. I don't believe very many people know the entire picture. I think some of them suspect. I think they have varying knowledge to varying degrees. Even U.S. presidents don't know everything. I'm convinced of that because if you look at the pyramid, they're kind of down on the pyramid. They're not near the top, not even close. U.S. presidents take orders. They don't give orders, and they take orders from their bosses and their controllers. So the people at the top of the pyramid, the very few people, the bankers know it, the Rothschilds know it, the Rockefellers know it, those kind of people know it. As far down as we can know about, they know a lot, but they don't know as much as those people do. None of them do.
Those are the global elite, correct?
Right. Those are the two families.
Okay.
The Rothschilds own the banks. The Rothschilds own the money. The Rockefellers, on the other hand, they own the arts and entertainment. They own the media, whether print or visual. They own the hospitals. They own what you see on TV. I mean, I mean, that's a very powerful family. They own the oil. I don't care if it's Chevron or Exxon or Texaco. That's Rockefeller. Those are the two most powerful families. If you were to put one of them on the top, it would probably be the Rothschilds because they own the money. They own everything. There's every knee of the elite bow to the Rothschild dynasty, and they have for quite a while.
I think that would be a good pickup point in the next segment that we've got going on today. And the reason is you know, I would love to do the lineage of the Rockefellers and Rothschilds to see who all is still within the bloodline. And I think some of the others that you were talking about were also the British government at one point. and maybe we can touch on that
Okay.
in the next segment of the Conspiracy Keepers. We'll be right back.